I'm going to call this meeting to order. Roll call.
McKnight.
Here.
Myers. Here. Roa.
Here.
Vogel.
Here.
Kinder.
Here. Do we have public comment on agenda items? Oh. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry about that. All right, so it looks like everybody's here for agenda topics. Okay, so let's go with Marcia first. You're just first on the on the list, if that's okay.
Where do you want?
Right there, if you want. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Yohe, and I currently serve as one of the 3 city representatives to the Meadville Area Sewer Authority, and I'm here this evening on their behalf, following up to a letter that we submitted to council back in September. And the request in that letter was that the council gives serious consideration to taking a very small portion of your American Rescue Program funding and offsetting the losses that the sewer authority was seeing as a result of the pandemic. We all know people were laid off, businesses were closed, people's hours were shortened, and for us, the sewer authority, that meant in 2020 we lost over $100,000 in revenue. That's significant, and significant for your ratepayers, our customers. What we also are concerned about is we realize there are many people wanting that money, and you have your own needs for that money. So we don't take that lightly. But what we also want to say is we really think that we're in a unique position where it's unfair at this point in time to ask our ratepayers, your taxpayers, to pony up even more money to make up that shortfall. We've been told that that would be roughly an additional 3% increase on top of what they're already paying. Well, why is that important? Well, it's important because they're already struggling. For the ones that it would most impact, they're barely able to pay their bills now. Number one. Number two, and more importantly, hopefully you all realize the sewage treatment plant we are using now is over 20 years old. That's the good news, and it's still working. The bad news is it needs replaced. We are at the end of its useful life. And quite frankly, MASSA is now in the process and final permitting for a new sewage treatment plant. The plans are drawn, the specs are about completed. I believe we just received funding approval, so we are moving down that pathway. The good news is we are going to reuse the site we have. We are going to reuse the infrastructure we can. The bad news is this plant upgrade, this overhaul, is still going to cost $20 million. I said that right. So what we're here to say and our concern is we've already had to start adjusting rates to anticipate that $20 million price tag we and our ratepayers, your taxpayers, are going to have to absorb. We therefore are urging you to consider one small payment from your ARPA funds that would help us prevent having to put an additional 3% rate increase on your taxpayers to cover these lost revenue. Revenue we need to be able to show Penvest and others that we are getting the funds we normally get and anticipate so that we can get a good rate on a Penvest loan. What we do think is heartening, or should be for you, is this really is a good use of those funds. It's an allowable use. It would plug a one-time expenditure, a one-time loss, and we will assure you that, unlike many others, this will be a one-time payment request. We are not asking the city to ongoingly support this organization. We just want some help with this because we know the impact it will have on your ratepayers. Finally, I would like to point out, if you did not see, we are a joint authority. It is the city and West Mead. that MASSA serves together. Hopefully you saw, but you may not, MASSA has already agreed to give the Sewer Authority $20,000 of their ARPA funds to help us cover some of these losses. We are just hoping that City Council will consider the same on our behalf and on your ratepayers' behalf, and we thank you for your consideration.
Marcia, I have a quick question. The $20 million that you're going to be spending on a new plant, do you know what that translates into a percentage of rate increase? Is it like 40% rate increase, or do you not have the figures yet?
I don't know that we know that. Again, we started a year or two ago doing it in very small increments because we know that's a lot easier for folks. And we do have some bond issues that will retire in a few years, so we are trying to stagger all this to keep the rate hikes as low as possible. But yes, I still think you're looking at several more rate hikes at a minimum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. All right, next, it looks like Ron Irwin, zoning.
Hello, my name is Ron Irwin, and I know you guys keep talking about zoning and such, but do we really need more zoning whenever we're not even enforcing the ones we have? And during a zoning hearing on May 21st, 2020, I brought up the illegal fill behind the property located at 1189, 1191 South Main, better known as the Common Roots property. And I was told, it would be looked into. But anyways, per the ordinance number 3702 of 2012, which had the intent of safety of community, protect natural drainage, and minimize flood damage, etc. So in that ordinance, 1371.09, indicates steps for compliance and complete must not exceed 30 days. So let's see here, part of 1373.03 for drainage facility is quoted as saying convey the flow of stormwater runoff in a safe and efficient manner. The system shall ensure proper drainage along streets and provide positive drainage away from buildings. The system shall also be designed to prevent the discharge of excess runoff onto adjacent properties. So let's see, also 1375.01, modification over 50% of market value, which by their own admissions, Common Roots admissions, they're about 5 times that, shall only be in full compliance with the provisions of this ordinance. And then also goes on, once the water subsided, we found a bicycle, which is in the picture I handed to you, in the middle of the lake created by the illegal fill. And that doesn't seem safe to me. They have kids playing around a man-made lake, and it's because of illegal fill, Let's see here. And as far as the foundations of all these neighboring properties, up through here, that extra water weight is a danger to those properties. We're talking about safety all the time. Everybody's worried about zoning and for this and that for safety. Is it really that safe to create a lake behind properties because of illegal fill? And then in your picture, if you look at that, just south of the property is a natural drain. I clearly marked it in the pictures. So this illegal fill is taking and blocking the natural flow of water to that drain. That's all they had to do is remove that illegal fill. And as I said, back in May 21st of 2020, this was brought to people's attention, and still to this day, it has not been resolved. So that brings me also to another point of talking about...
Is this relevant to the zoning ordinance item on the agenda for today's meeting?
It's zoning in general. You're talking about stormwater runoff. You want to spend $1.some million. There's no even final decimal to that for Heidi Cooper Park for stormwater runoff. And you have Mill Run that's washing out Stateside Laundromat's parking lot, or about to. Why don't we address the current problems? Instead of worried about trying to spend 1 point some odd million dollars on a park whenever we have a problem that is being ignored. Multiple problems in this city being ignored. And my next step is DEP. And then the final step will be that we will escrow all our stormwater runoff until this is resolved. And I'm talking all of our properties, not just this one. All of our properties within the city of Meadville, we will start escrowing the stormwater runoff fee until this is repaired, this is fixed. And you're going to have to do some fill behind our properties now because the weight of that water has taken and compacted that down, so there is no natural flow of water even if you remove the dike that was created. So hopefully that picture is clear enough for everybody to see that the problem that was created by illegal fill within the city, which didn't follow the own ordinance that says you're not allowed to do illegal fill.
When you say illegal fill, what do you mean illegal fill? Because to me, illegal fill is someone taking garbage and dumping it. That looks like leaves and stuff that have accumulated.
No, that's not leaves that accumulated, it was filtered.
Ron, can we do this at the end of the meeting when because we need to go with the agenda topics right now?
That's fine, all right, you're the one to call
You
me.
can ask your question at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Yep.
Monica?
Gonna want me to wait because I'm following with the same exact.
Okay, yeah. Linda?
I really don't. Most of you know me, and when I start to hear some issues and problems within a city I love, I have concerns. Seems like everywhere I go today, and I'm busy, but I go to meetings, I go to a lot of places, a lot of houses. That's what I do. I sell real estate for 15 years in the city of Meadville. When I hear grumblings of what's coming down the pike for zoning, I'm going to get involved because I don't like what I'm hearing. And I will challenge anybody if I hear something that is no need for a change or that is it really going to make a difference in our city? Are we going forward or are we going backward? That's why I'm here. And when I see this, it makes me sick because there's a lot of things. One time a complaint was against me. I came to the council meeting. I think, Gary, you might remember it. And they were going to fine me because of mice and a rental I have. And I can tell you, my rentals are not slum. I would live in any one of my rentals, so I take objections to some of the language that's been in the paper on rentals. But anyhow, I came down to see council because they were going to come down on me. And you know what? The rats and the mice that were behind, on a property behind my garage of my office, you know what they were told what they had to do? That's where the mice and the rats were. You know what the city told them they could do? Put a tarp over it. That really cured the problems. So I'm just telling you, I'm here to listen, to get involved, and boy, let me tell you, you'll hear a lot from me if I hear more grumblings out there for where our city's going. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, notice of executive session.
On March 9th, 2022, an executive session was held to discuss personnel.
Approval of minutes, March 22nd.
So moved.
I'll give a second.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, roll call.
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. Communication.
There is no communications to council.
Manager's report.
So first, we have Andy Walker from Allegheny College here to discuss the formation of a community development corporation. Andy?
Anybody more lead into that, Mary Ann?
Nope,
or-
that's it.
All right. Well, council, it's good to be before you this evening. Thank you for Mayor Kinder for the invitation to join you. I met a few weeks ago with Mayor Kinder and Ottoman City staff on this opportunity, and was invited to come to council to sort of update you all on some funding that the college has received to move forward with sort of capacity building to help Meadville in terms of capacity building for downtown development and revitalization. This is a topic, right? Of course, I come before you as your former city manager just a year ago, and having worked with Mary Ann as a director of community development position prior to that. But sort of this issue goes back several years. In fact, it was March 3rd, 2020, so just before the pandemic, that council gathered in this room a bunch of community stakeholders looking to, it was a meeting with the Pennsylvania Downtown Center, representative from the Pennsylvania Downtown Center, and a bunch of community stakeholders talking about the Keystone Communities program and looking for a designation for a 5-year strategic plan for downtown, looking for resources to build capacity for that purpose. And of course, we all know what happened 2 weeks later. Unbeknownst to us, the world shut down, and there wasn't much progress beyond that, right? In fact, we've not revisited as a community the Keystone Communities designation. And just prior to that, Mary Ann and I had taken a trip to Erie to visit the R West Bayfront program, which is a neighborhood revitalization program in Erie that is partnership with Gannon University as a potential model for our community. And even prior to that, years leading up to that, I had been in conversation with Brian Hill. Brian Hill is a program officer at the Richard King Mellon Foundation in Pittsburgh. Brian also happens to be a former Meadville City Council member, a Meadville native. And Brian had been talking to me in the foundation's interest in investing in communities, particularly communities with colleges and universities, knowing that colleges and universities are economic drivers in terms of visitorship and whatnot, and the buying power and impact of students and families, and their interest in developing a grant program that would support capacity building and revitalization in those communities in Western Pennsylvania. And so as part of that initiative, it was again just immediately prior to the pandemic, and I think it was in late 19 or early 2020, the Richard King Mellon Foundation had provided funding, a small grant to the college to conduct sort of a 30,000 look on sort of case studies of best practices for college communities across the country for downtown economic development, revitalization, and investments that those colleges and universities made. Places like Albion College in Albion, Michigan, Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin, DePaul University in Greencastle, Union College in Schenectady, and a few other examples, sort of relevant of communities in size and demographics to Meadville and Allegheny. So this is a report that I'll be glad to share with council. I've shared it with city staff and maybe some members of council, but I will share it with all of you after this meeting. So that grant revisit ended, and that resulted in that June 2020 report. And really nothing sort of moved forward with that program during the pandemic until just this past summer, when the foundation reached out to me at the college again and asked if they could do a walking tour of downtown Meadville. And so Mary Ann was part of that. Katie Wickert joined us, and we sort of did a walking tour. We met in the coffee shop, and we really talked about what was sort of the vision that Meadville had for the community for downtown. Talked about what are some of the hurdles, what are the needs, what are prior efforts, where is their momentum, and we had an open and honest conversation sort of about capacity in Meadville for downtown revitalization. One of the things we talked about that meeting was the findings in the city's, this is the Strategic Management Planning and Program Report, right? That is only about a year old. And one of the findings there is in the Economic and Community Development Chapter 6, talks about, right, formally starting a program for downtown revitalization, and particularly exploring the creation of a downtown development corporation for that purpose. We talked about the landscape of economic development organizations in Meadville. We've got an Economic Progress Alliance of Crawford County that is really a traditional county-wide economic development agency with machinery and equipment loan funds and access to other grant loan programs for businesses. Of course, their primary interest, they're not a downtown development organization per se. They own the former Aftech site, which is now the Crawford Business Park, which is a wild success in terms of its redevelopment, and the Greenwood Industrial Park. But they're not a downtown-focused economic development group. The city has its own redevelopment authority, which hasn't had staff for a few years now. And so the authority, of course, has been focusing mostly on blight-related issues, I think, but with no staff. We've got a Meadville Independent Business Alliance, which is a loose alliance of, let's say loose, but they're not organizationally formed in terms of an alliance of business owners who are doing great work to promote downtown, hold events, but they're not doing, without staff, without capacity to lead that effort. And then, of course, we have a Chamber of Commerce, which is a membership organization that serves not only Meadville, but the entire western part of the county. So we've been in conversation for several years that we've sort of lacked the resources and capacity for an organization dedicated to downtown revitalization and development, which is found in lots of communities our size, right? I talked about the our West Bayfront program. Oil City has a Main Street program. I've been talking to Rena here at the city, Beaver Falls. There's lots of communities and even third-class cities that have dedicated either Main Street or community development corporations or downtown development corporations. They sometimes have different mission or vision or focus, but often have a very similar mission. So weeks later, after that August visit, the foundation contacted me again and actually invited the college, and really the college on behalf of the Meadville community, to apply to a new grant program that they had created, the Western Pennsylvania Economic Development Program. And specifically targeted, it was a first phase, first year of the program, specifically targeted for colleges and universities in Western Pennsylvania. Obviously, Western Pennsylvania has a rich landscape of higher education institutions. And so we put together sort of a scope of work for resources around planning consultants, around consultants for organizational development. And a grant was awarded to the college at the very end of last year. And that grant provides, again, resources for consulting fees, to develop requests for proposals, to pay a planning consultant, to lead a public engagement process, for some feasibility studies for some capital projects, and even a small portion of funding if we're to start a new organization, to hire a director and staffing. And though it's a one-year planning grant, the opportunity, I think, is to, the Mellon Foundation knows, right, their investments are long-term. They know that investments in development revitalization take a long time, and so we anticipate that they could be a partner if we're successful in our planning and things move forward. We expect this could be a longer-term relationship with the foundation, and really holding Meadville as an example, as sort of a case study, right, for these types of investments and the roles that colleges and universities can play in their host communities together. So really my goal, I wanted to bring to you, so that grant is actually a $155,000 grant award, and it's a one-year planning grant. And Mr. Crowley, I've got an actual press release for you and copies for all of council. Gary, I'll give that to. But tonight is really sort of the first sort of beginning the public discussion about this, and my goal here was to sort of bring council up to speed on sort of the background of how we sort of arrived where we are today in these conversations with the foundation, with city staff, with the prior council, and now to talk about next steps. And one of those next steps is a planned sort of open house style forum on Tuesday, April 19th, that we've got planned at the second floor of the Meadville Public Library. Thank you, Dan Slozak. To really begin to seek interested the public in terms of their vision for downtown, priorities for what they think, and really just to really start a conversation. And it'll formally start a process then where I think next steps is to form then an advisory or stakeholder committee that will work together, that I'll work with city staff, with council or subcommittee of council as you direct, to work on a stakeholder advisory committee that will then work on an RFP to find and secure a planning consultant, to choose that planning consultant, and then to sort of steer the process of working with the community over the next 9 months or a year to ideally land at a place, and with a 5-year strategy, right? One of where we know, going back to the March 3rd, 2020 meeting here about the Keystone Communities designation, we think it's important, right, to have that program by the Department of Community and Economic Development requires that a community adopt a 5-year strategy to be eligible then for certain programs or priority for facade grant funding or tax credit programs or other incentives from the Commonwealth. So that'll definitely be part of that. So that's sort of where we're at. Ultimately, right, if we proceed to build and establish a community development corporation, it'll need a board of directors. We expect that consultant to walk us through that, and maybe some, maybe with a stakeholder advisory committee, maybe some of those members become board of director members, but that'll be a process that will sort of evolve and include council and a much further dialogue. And lastly, I'm sensitive. I've had conversations with Mary Ann. Your staff showed no mercy with your agenda tonight, which is a mile long. But I'm sensitive, right, to the responsibilities of city staff and the capacity. And so, I will plan to do my best to work directly with Mary Ann and communicate and her team, but to be as helpful and take the lead on some of these initiatives in terms of gathering and meeting, planning and facilitation and whatnot. So anyhow, that's where we're at with these new resources. We're excited about the opportunity and the investment and the foundation's investment in Meadville. And I look forward to working with the council, with city staff, with the community. And I'll be glad, right, the press release that I just handed you has my contact information at the top. I'll be glad to meet individually with members of council if you'd like to discuss further. And with that, I'll be quiet and could maybe answer any initial questions you might have or let you get on to your meeting.
Anybody have questions for Andy?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to ask you something. I understand that the French Creek development, because I'm on that economic progress.
Yes, right.
And that the hopes was, and there was money set aside and everything else, to develop and turn the city around and have waterfront as our frontage. That there was, because of lack of action somewhere, I don't know where, that slipped through, that they put a barrier that they can't develop for what, 50 or 100 feet? Do you know about that?
Well, a little bit to be dangerous, and actually, so there is a city ordinance that that governs development in the floodplain, right, and then also within a riparian buffer. And I would point to Gary to explain. I don't know that it completely prohibits any development, but there are regulations with respect to environmental regulations largely that are governed by city ordinance,
as well as DEP regulations.
Well, I understand to correct that they can correct it, but it's going to cost a lot more money because something slipped through and that put the French Creek development to help turn the city around. And if you're looking at zoning, that's what I'm hearing.
The zoning, I will say the zoning does take into account that development down there and considers that as basically a use that would be allowed to allow a wide range of uses down there to accommodate whatever it is that ends up coming out of that process.
Is it up to the frontage?
I'm sorry?
Is it up to the frontage with the Bicentennial Park, which my husband was very involved in, and that started the development to have that whole French Creek development along there?
It would incorporate all that entire area of town.
But I understand now from the economic progress that was put on hold because something wasn't taken care of in a timely fashion. That's all I heard. I just thought I'd like to ask about that.
Yeah, I'd encourage
because that
you to.
development would be really important.
I'd encourage you to speak to the Economic Progress Line staff about it. I mean, there's existing, that's been on the books for several years, wearing my former city manager hat, regulations that govern floodplain and riparian area development that weren't new or recent or snuck in necessarily. But we know, right, that's another exciting opportunity for development
You bet
in
it is.
Meadville. Yep.
Absolutely.
And arguably, right, we need a downtown as well as just as strong to connect that to, right, to draw people in and to support that. So that's
It's a
and I think,
marriage.
there's another, I'm also very excited about trail opportunities, right? In terms
Right.
of lots of developments going on with the future replacement of Spring Street Bridge and other PennDOT plans that really are dynamic.
Thank you, Andy, for that. I appreciate it. Gary, I think you're up next.
All right, thank you, Council.
Yeah, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, so we talked last time about the proposed zoning update and the fact that we're gonna take a lot of time to talk about it because there are some new things in it. You'll recall, again, as a recap, there was the Meadville effort from a few years ago, put together a grassroots planning effort. The council at the time essentially blessed as an update to the city's comprehensive plan and took it into account, and then sought the grant funding from the state to go through the zoning update to incorporate many of the recommendations from Meadville into the zoning ordinance. Last time we introduced that ordinance in a general sense, and today I want to talk a little bit about the form-based part of it, which is frankly quite new. I don't know any other community in Northwest Pennsylvania that is even considering it. There are some controversial things in it. I'll be straight up front with that. I mean, it's a fundamental change in some of the areas of town where we're looking at some things. So I do want to just put that out there. So it's design and use, okay? Traditional zoning really talks more about uses that you're allowed to have on a property, setbacks of buildings, things like that. The form-based zoning, as I talked about last time, it takes into account more what does it look like, what does a building look like, what shape does it take, what form does it take, where is it placed on the lot. And the goal is to try to make it, essentially one of the recommendations from Meadville was, the people said, you know, what we like the look and feel of our neighborhoods, we want that to remain the same as much as possible when redevelopment occurs. And one of the things that the form-based zoning would do is that basically what they did, what the consultant did, and they've written several of these types of ordinances around the state, what they did was they basically went out and looked, okay, what's here? What's out there? What does it look like now? And they wrote these regulations essentially, these draft regulations essentially to say, to keep that feel. If there is redevelopment, they want it to look the same. And at the same time, going hand in hand with that, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself a little bit as far as the presentation is concerned, is it allows greater uses then in those areas of the houses that exist, of the buildings that exist, you know, so like neighborhood scale businesses and things like that, that may allow greater reuse of existing buildings that may not make sense anymore as large houses that maybe don't support the families that we have today. So, I think I mentioned all of that already. So skipping the map real quick, form-based zoning, again, I talked about this and we talked about a lot of it. Again, it happens more in the southeast part of the state. It doesn't, we don't see it a whole lot here. But one thing I do want to stress is that it only applies in the mixed-use districts. So if you go back to the previous slide that you have, and it's kind of tough to see, and I apologize for that. But basically, what's proposed to be mixed use is the areas that you can see in color there. And again, that's tough to see. This is all on the website where you can actually, you can open it up, you can open the PDF and really drill down to, essentially lot level. But it's really in the older areas of town, in the core walkable build-out areas of town. And you can see there, on the west, you can see that in the upper left part, that's Fifth Ward. You'll see a couple different colors there. In the middle right, that's Hillcrest, just to give you some orientation. And the pinkish area in the middle there, that's pretty much downtown. That's the current, if you will, central business district. Okay, that's all part of it. It also does include Yale Village, Williamville Village, and Gulfview Apartments to the north, which we couldn't fit in this map to try to give you some kind of scale. So that's where these form-based regs will take effect. They won't take effect anywhere else. The industrial areas, the R1 areas, those are not impacted at all. So those would stay largely the same as far as regulation standpoint. So in the ordinance, there's 12 different types of buildings that it considers from a form-based perspective, and I'm going to talk about just 3 of them right today, and the rest of them are in the ordinance. They all look pretty much the same. These are just quick views showing what these buildings can look like, essentially. And this is where it gets into the interesting part of it, the new part of it, where it says this is what your building is going to look like as opposed to where you're going to put it. Okay, it talks about that as well. But this is the part that is new and probably it takes them quite some time to digest. So I'll just go right through them. So we're talking about a single-family detached house. Okay, just a regular house. The criteria would be that the building has to be at least 2 stories. Roofs must be pitched. Exterior shall be clad in brick or horizontally oriented or scalloped siding. Concrete or stucco shall not be permitted. The primary entrance to the building shall be from a door facing the public street of greater predominance, so like the main street if it's on a corner, and leads directly to the sidewalk. The building shall be closely compatible in size to other buildings on that lot, basically on that block. And the appearance, we get closely compatible in size and appearance to existing houses. So again, it goes back to that my Meadville recommendation that they want the houses to look the same as what's there now. Garages would be located behind the front face of the house, so it's not in front of a house, and accessed by an alley if possible. So that's kind of what, if there were to be a new house built in that area, it would need to conform to these rules from a look standpoint, from a form standpoint. This is a neighborhood shopper conversion from residential. You remember I talked about how the ordinance would allow greater use of buildings in those mixed-use areas. Again, it's supposed to look mainly basically like a single-family house. Talks the same similar ideas about the exterior and the roof pitch. Primary entrance from the door facing the public street, et cetera, et cetera. And so most of these things that's pretty much the same as an R1 as a single-family residence. It also includes the requirement that dumpsters, et cetera, shall be behind the front wall of the building. So you'll see it's similar, and there's 12 of these again, as I said in the ordinance, and I'm not going to go through all of them. This is, for example, a single-story business in what would be what's right now essentially the B2 district, down Park Avenue, down out North Street, kind of like a T shape. So in those areas, you can have a single-story business. What it's supposed to, and again, design criteria there: exterior shall be clad in brick, wood, stone masonry, terracotta, or similar material. Concrete, stucco, and metal facade shall not be permitted. Front and side yards shall be minimized so the building facades are no more than 5 feet from adjacent sidewalks. That's kind of a reverse from typical zoning. Typical zoning says you have to be at least this far from. This says you can only be this far from. It pulls buildings closer to the sidewalks. A lot of it has to do with pedestrian safety, so that if someone is walking down the sidewalk to access a building, they don't walk through a parking lot to get to it. That's where that comes from. It talks about being closely compatible in size. You'll see that in most of them to try to keep the same scale. And again, accessory structures and dumpsters shall be located in not be between a front wall of the building and the front lot line. So I just said a lot of stuff, and there's a lot more in the ordinance when it comes to the other 9 types of buildings that we talk about here. But that's one of the main things that is a change again. Okay, so you really need to think about, everybody needs to think about it. Is that what we want to see, or isn't what we want to see? Does it incorporate my Meadville or doesn't it? So there's a lot of information there, and I wanted to pause there just to see if there were any specific questions you might have right now about how that might apply.
Gary, I'm almost 50 years old, and when I get to be a senior citizen, I'm going to want a 1-story home. And I can't build that 1-story home. And I want a stone house, and I can't build a stone house. And I want a garage attached to my house. I don't want to have to spend an extra $7,000 of pavement to put it behind the house. And I'm not the only person in that category. I took a look at my neighborhood. My neighbor's Elizabethan half-timber house. You call it Tudor. You couldn't build it because it has stucco. My other neighbor's ranch house, you can't build it because it's 1 story. The 2 Garrison Colonials in the neighborhood, they have stone facades. You can't build them because they have stone facades. The stone cottage at the end of Maple Street, you couldn't build it because it's made of stone. And none of them you could build because they have garages on the front. What good is the ordinance if you can't build the houses? You couldn't even build this house next door in Diamond Park Heritage because it's got a flat roof.
Jim, is your house in the mixed use?
No,
Your
but I
neighborhood?
can't
Yeah.
put it, I couldn't put my house in
Couldn't
mixed
build
use,
it.
that's the whole point.
Well, when I become a senior citizen, I'm gonna wanna live in a community where I can walk around and easily access things. I think different people want different
Exactly,
things. out of
that's
it.
my point, but do you want a 2-story, or would you prefer a 1-story? We have a number of people who are physically challenged and senior citizens in the community. A 2-story house is not an option for them. So why mandate a two-story house in those districts?
I mean, it would also imply, right, that to do that, you'd have to level something that's there or build on a vacant lot, right? I mean, do we have a lot of built,
What
I
else?
mean,
Well, from a single-family dwelling standpoint, in my time here, I think there's been about 15 houses built. Of those, one of them would be in the mixed-use area. The other 14 were in the R1 areas, Plateau, north end of town, things like that. So if this had been in place, just to try to give some context, not judging the value of the regulation, just the facts on the ground, of those houses, one of them would have said, no, that has to be 2 stories, and the one that was built was a 1-story in the mixed use. But one of the 15 houses in my time here would have been in one of these areas.
But if there's only been 15 in that's one a year,
Roughly.
based roughly on your tenure. If there's only 15, then why have the regulation to start with? Because it doesn't apply.
It would appear to have very little impact on because on the ground, we aren't seeing that redevelopment. So I guess that could go both ways. What's the point? I mean, what's the point of having that regulation if you're not going to build it anyway? I guess on the other side is, then it's going to have minimal impact if you look at it from that perspective as well. It's a valid point, no question there's a valid point there, but just for context, that's where the houses are being built. They're not being built right now in those areas, but if they were to be rebuilt there, again, the recommendation from my Meadville, the finding there says we want it to feel the same, and thus that's the reason for that requirement. Any other questions on that? You're right, though. If any of those houses were to be built in the mixed-use area, if they wanted to build that in those mixed areas, that would not be permitted. You're absolutely right.
But is that right? I mean, a guy works, to build what he wants, I mean, I guess, I kind of understand what Jim's saying. We're almost trying to tell people, this is how you have to live. If I like this neighborhood, if I grew up in a neighborhood and I still want my house the way that it was, and you're saying now the zoning is telling me I can't, do I have to move out of the neighborhood that I grew up in just to be able to build a house that I want and probably could only afford? I mean, I just don't, I don't know if we have that right. I don't know if we should make that, I don't know.
These are appropriate for a planned unit development, but not for a city like ours. There's a big difference. Planned unit development, yeah, regulate the size of home, the orientation, that's fine, because you are buying ahead of time into that subdivision knowing full well. But to have a property, I did a study of Diamond Park Heritage. You'd have to take the Unitarian Church and rotate it 90 degrees and face the busier street. Stone Methodist is probably too tall. This has a mansard roof. You'd have to screen the parking lot over here. You'd have to tear down the tar mansion and rotate the courthouse. So you would, to comply with the ordinance, you would have to destroy the heritage that you purport to protect.
well, so first of all, I think everything that's standing still stands, right? Like, this doesn't tear down things that we have. And I think that what it does, my understanding, because I went to the several years of planning commission meetings that developed the draft code, and it became very clear that what is drafted was not drafted out of thin air and what people wanted to see. It was people going out, actually going through our neighborhoods and seeing what they looked like right now. And so I think when Gary says that it's coming from people like the way their neighborhoods feel, it's because people, yeah, that's what we heard, that they like the feel of their neighborhood. Like Larry, like you're saying, you grew up in a neighborhood, you want it to remain that way, you like the way that it feels, and that's what it's trying, that's my understanding of the farm base. I mean, this is the conversation we'll have for months.
If it's a residential neighborhood, that's understandable, but if it is a mixed-use neighborhood, and we don't know how many of those people lived in MU neighborhoods.
Right, yeah.
You don't have the figures on how many people live in those mixed-use neighborhoods.
Yeah.
The point is, if you can't build what you already want to protect with the zoning ordinance, if you can't rebuild it if this was a blank slate, if this was Diamond Park, you couldn't rebuild half or more of the structures here.
You could, because it was created. What's the conversation we're supposed to have tonight? Like, what are we?
And all these questions are good.
Okay.
It's good stuff.
So in the same idea, you know, on some of these lots, we've got some small empty lots, right? Like that you wouldn't be able to buy or build on anyway, right? But you could technically put like a trailer on there, but we've got zoning that says we cannot have trailers in the city, right? Because there are reasons that people don't want trailers in the cities, right? Like
Not standalone.
right, standalone trailers. Not that there's anything wrong with standalone trailers, but at some point, we put in zoning that there are no standalone trailers, right, in the city of Meadville, and you still wouldn't be able to do that, correct? And in a lot of cities, right, like that's the same thing. So there's zoning for things like that for reasons, right? And so people want to make sure that the neighborhoods are kind of the same, right? Like they stay the same, that you know, we're building something that feels alike, right? And then that's kind of what we're doing here. In these mixed-use areas, they're two-story buildings because most of the buildings are 2 stories. They're this far back because you can't build them further closer to the street because all the other houses are the same far back, right? Like, so it's just keeping the feel of the neighborhood, right? Okay, I'm just trying to get the feel of that.
To be clear, the city has the power to do this. I mean, it's settled law that these types of regulations are legal. So really what it comes from now, or how we come to it now is really, it's political. It's a political decision to say, is that what we want it to look like or don't we?
Right.
And again, going back, council at the time said, we like this, we think this is good, let's incorporate it into our zoning and our comp plan, and let's move forward with it. And this is what came out of that. This is essentially what came out of that planning process. Whether or not, you know, the current council feels exactly the same way. I guess some don't feel the same way, but that's where it came from. But to answer the question was specifically brought up, can we do this? Yes, we can. The city can do this. It's a matter of, is this the vision the council wants? I'll just put that out there.
The difference between can and should. We can do it, but the question is whether we should do that.
Right. So, so it looks like on our tentative timeline, tonight is about introducing specific regulations. And I feel like this conversation of we can and we should, like, will continue over the course of the year. Like, this is the conversation we'll continue to have. And it's like, if we dig in and are, I don't know, like, learning the content and can digest it as much as we can, then we will work this out in time.
Right.
I'm saying this for myself because I feel like I'm taking a high-level defense of this, and I shouldn't do that.
Well, that's the whole point of Gary being here and doing multiple
Well, he has to be here
presentations, right? No, yeah. The zoning presentation, so, sorry.
I would like to also say though, I feel like when my understanding is we're trying to create a feeling of place so that like projects, so that people come, they're like, this is a really cool town, they kept hold of their heritage, that they didn't go, oh, what, there's a thing built there, what is that? And I've been in cool cities like out west, like Taos and Santa Fe, where I mean, I'm sure they probably have more money, but you know, where their codes about building with, you know, I told Gary that with Adobe, they give a feeling of place, you know, and I think that's where I would just chime in. It would be nice to keep the place so people feel community.
Okay.
You want to keep going, yeah.
So we talked about the form buildings themselves. We'll shift a little bit to talk about site. What does the site look like? I've already talked about this a little bit, and Councilman Raw referenced it. The buildings would basically say buildings need to face the busier street, the primary street, if you will, and access them would be from a side street if it's on the corner. And again, as I mentioned, traditional zoning has the minimum setbacks. The proposed standards largely say, basically say the setback shall be, give or take, the setback of the existing buildings on that lot, or on that block. So basically you would need to meet those same standards, same setbacks as the other buildings that already exist in the lot. This is a quick map of street typologies, and when they talk about typologies, it's basically what's the width of the street, what's the traffic load, what's its purpose. So you'll see North Main Street, and North Main Street basically goes through town. It's a collector street. It brings traffic into town. It also takes traffic through town. So it's a wider street. There's more traffic on it, and then goes all the way down to alleys. So you have alleys in town that really just accessing. They're oftentimes just the backs of properties, or they're really just going from one block to the other. So it has the whole gambit. It runs the gambit, and some of the regulations are based on that type of street that you're fronting on. It gets fairly complicated, but that's really the concept behind that as far as using street type. The next slide, I'll go through a couple of these, and these are pretty familiar, I think, for anyone who might have looked at the zoning ordinance, whatever that's worth. So you'll see in the upper left, you'll see basically what lots would look like. What are the setbacks? When we talk about a setback, what does that mean? Just basically the minimum, or the distances for property lines, not necessarily the minimums, but the distances required. And you'll see called out in that all the various types of setbacks that you have for primary, principal uses and for accessory uses. Just one thing I want to point out here, in the upper left, you'll see interior lot and you'll see corner lot. Interior lots have front property line, or front setbacks, rear setbacks, and side setbacks. Corner lots have front yards and side yards. They don't have any rear yards. Just keep that in mind as you're going through the ordinance. Any property line facing a street is considered a front yard. Okay, that's not normal. I talked last time about how zoning, when you talk about vocabulary in zoning, don't think it's normal English usage, and that's one of them. Okay, so the concept there. It has maximum building heights, etc. I don't want to get into too much detail on these. There's also 12 of these based on each building typology. But that just gives you a basic idea of what these, what do these look like. There's the neighborhood shop typology. Again, you've got the corner with the two front yards, etc., etc. You'll see in each of these, at least in the first one, you'll see that the accessory structure for the single-family one is behind the building, behind the main building. It gives you an idea of what they're talking about there. And then single-story business, we talked about that a little bit. You have the interior lot. There's also some provisions here for allowing additional encroachments into front yards, what's called architectural projections. Architectural encroachments allow like porches, stoops, bay windows, things like that to encroach into that front required setback if necessary. So it has some flexibility there as well. These getting to, and these tables here, the next slide there in the MU1 district, that's the current, essentially the multiple family residential district, and it's generally going to be, it would be proposed to be converted to the mixed use 1 district, okay, just so you're aware. This talks about the required yards, and you'll see in that first, the top one, you'll see the type of road, okay, the type of street. And you'll see in that first row there under principal structure for required yards, it says front yard, average of front yards of existing buildings on the block. And that's where I talked about trying to match that feel. So you have a bunch of houses that are basically roughly the same setback, so you're not going to build one that's way back. We have a couple of those in town, and I guess the thought is there, if you're walking along and you suddenly have this, you're missing something, you feel like maybe you're missing something there. This would say, okay, no, that building needs to be brought up and to be generally in line, average in line with those other buildings. Doesn't apply, of course, on an alley. Oftentimes you're going to have vehicular access from that. You're going to want to make sure you do have that minimum setback there. But going through that, you'll see average of side yards, average of rear yards, etc. Goes through. It's a very similar feel, and the whole concept behind that is making it feel like the buildings that are already there. That's what that does. Any questions on that? I mean, the next two are very similar to that. You'll see in the MU3 district, which is currently the B1 Central Business District, there is a minimum setback of 0. You can build right to the front property line. And then the maximum is the average of the other buildings. So that's what, again, where setbacks are usually minimums, this is actually a maximum. So you're going to build at the sidewalk, and if you're going to build back at all, it's got to be the average of the other buildings on that block. Same thing with side and rear yards. That really is to maximize the area that you can build in the central business district. And then Diamond Park, as Councilman Roa referenced a little bit earlier, this is what that one would look like. Again, average of front yards in general. Pretty much the same types of regulations there from a setback perspective. So I just wanted to go through those quickly, but that gives you an idea of what, from a form-based perspective, trying to preserve the feel. That's really what that's doing here. What's there now, mimic that. In very short, that's what that means. With that, that's pretty much all I had today. There's a lot there. There's a lot to think about, a lot for everybody to think about, to say, is that what we're looking for or not? Any questions from the lot's perspective, setback perspective at the moment?
So when we talk about average, are we talking about mean, median, mode?
Average. Mean.
They're all three averages. Median,
Mean,
mean,
yeah. Add them up and divide.
Are these on our website, the presentations?
They're not, but we will be putting those on as they go forward.
Thank you, Gary.
Can I ask some questions?
At the end of the meeting, I think you can grab Gary.
She was allowed to ask questions
Old
of the other
business.
speaker.
Thank you, Your Honor. So we have a letter of resignation from Lucinda Morgan from the Meadville Area Water Authority. She submitted her letter of resignation as she will be leaving the area. This leaves 3 vacancies to be filled on ABCs, 1 at the Market Authority, 1 at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and now 1 for the Water Authority.
Need a motion to accept that resignation?
Motion?
second.
Discussion? Roll call.
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. Ordinance third and final reading? Oh, wait, that was it, just, okay. Ordinance third and final reading. Amendment Article 741, parades, public assemblies.
An ordinance of the City of Meadville, Pennsylvania, repealing and replacing Article 741 of the Municipal Code of the City of Meadville entitled Parades and Public Assemblies, and replacing it with a new Article 741 entitled Parades and Public Assemblies.
So moved.
Motion for the third, yeah, and final reading.
I'll move.
Okay, second? Oh. Discussion?
I still have a philosophical problem that we are going to charge fees and demand insurance from the people who are least likely to cause us to expend money on security. And on the other hand, we will not be charging insurance fees to those groups who might be the most likely.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. I endorse a free speech, but I still have a philosophical problem with that.
I feel like that's like constitutional and,
Yes.
you know, I understand what you mean,
Yes.
philosophical question, I dig it, I dig it. Roll call.
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. New business? Ordinance first and second reading, regulation of 911 addressing by Crawford County.
An ordinance of the City of Meadville, Crawford County, Pennsylvania to authorize and designate Crawford County to assign property address numbering for new city buildings and uses in accordance with the standards required by the Crawford County Enhanced 911 Automatic Location Information System for the health and safety of city residents.
Motion for first reading,
So moved.
Second?
discussion?
So Your Honor, this is something that the county has requested. Currently in Crawford County, there are only 3 municipalities who do not use the county for 911 addressing, the city, Titusville, and Conneaut Lake. Due to voting registration and requirements that the county is putting out, in order to effectively get those out to residents, the county would prefer to have all 911 addressing under their responsibility. Titusville and Conneaut Lake have already moved forward with assigning addressing to the county. The city will still maintain responsibility for enforcing.
Does anybody have any questions on it?
Does this take like any amount of work off of, right. We'll take a look again. Roll call?
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Roa?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye. Motion for second reading.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? And roll call.
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Roa?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye. Discussion, subcommittee meeting and sunshine law regulations. Gary?
Sure. Council, questions have come up in certain inquiries from the press as well as council members regarding how the Sunshine Act might apply to the new meetings that council has been having this year, both at subcommittee levels or work sessions. We touched on the Sunshine Act, which most people are aware of, has the general requirement and the intent that government proceedings should be held in public, right? It's a simple intent, but it gets a little bit more complicated when you start applying that law to various types of get-togethers, right, which government may have. I do want to start with a conclusion that I do not believe that, based on the Sunshine Act and the facts, that there have been any violations of the Sunshine Act by this council or any members of this council so far. There have been none that I'm aware of. That being said, I think we can touch on some of the key factors that we need to consider as we go forward of what meetings need to be advertised. And just to back up, when council formed its subcommittees, council indicated that you desired to be extra transparent, right? And you've done that to a commendable degree. With respect to the subcommittee meetings, when we look at the Sunshine Act, what does the Sunshine Act require, right? So first, there's a number of defined terms, right? And that's where it gets a little complicated. But basically, the Sunshine Act says that official action and deliberations by a quorum of the members of an agency should be held in public, unless one of the many exceptions applies, right? But that's the general rule. Public meetings have notice so that the public can attend. We keep minutes so people know what happened, what decisions were made. So then you start looking at those words, though, and they're all defined by the Act. Okay, what's an official action? What's a deliberation? What's an agency? Okay, and then what's a meeting? Okay. When we look in general, the first question is, are city subcommittees agencies, right? And if you look at the definition, an agency includes the body, council, and committees. Okay, so at the first level, a subcommittee is an agency under the Sunshine Act. So a subcommittee at the first level, the Sunshine Act would apply, okay, to various sessions, right, that a subcommittee might have. Then you look and say, well, what's a meeting? Okay, well, a meeting is a prearranged gathering of the agency, right, which includes subcommittees, where the members are together for the purpose of deliberating or taking official action. So then you say, well, what's deliberating? We all think we know what that means, right? What does it mean? It actually means discussing agency business for the purpose of making a decision, right? So then you have to say, well, what's agency business? Well, they define that too, right? So agency business is the framing, the preparation, the making, the enactment of laws, policy, contracts, adjudication of rights. It excludes administrative action. So things like getting together to talk about having a meeting, that's not a meeting, right? So for example, if two members of a committee, right, a quorum, get together to say, we should meet on Tuesday and we should discuss those items. We should meet on Thursday to discuss those items. That first session is not a meeting, right? You're not deliberating agency business. You're talking about getting together to deliberate agency business. And that's what happened on the one occasion that was reported on. That's why that was not a violation of the Sunshine Act. What's official action? That is when you're actually voting, right, on it. We know what that means, right? That's enacting an ordinance, passing a resolution, establishing a formal policy. So if you look at all of those defined terms, you can see, okay, well, what's that all mean for you, right? Well, what it means is we ask the question, are city subcommittees, which you formed, appointed, are they authorized to render advice to you, right, city council? I think the answer is yes, right? That's what our subcommittees are generally doing is you're all working hard, coming with, whether it's a policy or a draft climate action plan or a proposed ordinance on a priority action item for you, the committees are rendering advice. So that answer is yes. Then the question is, and this one's more complicated, if a quorum of that subcommittee, so if it's a subcommittee of two, which yours are, if you're both together, and if you are together to take official action or to deliberate agency business, then it's a meeting, okay? So that's why a couple months ago, when you formed the subcommittees, we said, let's advertise all of them, right? Which is what we're doing, right? We're treating all of those as meetings in an abundance of caution that probably 90% of those are public meetings, right? Where two of you might be discussing, right? Engaging in discussion together to come up with a plan to render advice. Those are public meetings. That's why we're doing that. And I believe you're in full compliance with the Sunshine Act in doing that, right? But that doesn't mean that if two of you are having coffee or out meeting constituents or at church sitting in the same pew or at any other public event where you might be interacting with people, right? You might have a brief discussion about we're going to get together Tuesday. That's not a meeting, okay? I know it's a little complicated when you look at the defined terms, right? This council has been very transparent. I believe you're following all the rules of the Sunshine Act. We're going to continue to advertise all the subcommittee meetings. The public's welcome to come. There are agendas of what's going to be talked about. We're taking minutes. That's it.
So Gary, if we disbanded subcommittees and just had single-person liaisons, there wouldn't be this issue and we wouldn't be spending 3/4 of Katie's time taking minutes, which is about what it's taking right now.
That's correct. That's correct. And in the past, both this council and many, many municipal bodies do that, where we don't have formal subcommittees, but we have liaisons, so that you're not deliberating then by definition. So yes, you're right.
Talking to yourself does not count as.
Mostly no.
Most of the
Your
time.
personalities are split.
Right.
But there could be, I mean, I think that, right, could that happen where the subcommittees, right, we've each subcommittee has kind of taken on several priorities, and we could delegate them, right, where,
Yes.
you know, some of us are each working on our own kind of thing, and we can move that forward
Yes.
with staff, with
Yes.
other folks.
Mhm.
All right.
It only applies if two of you, a quorum of the subcommittee, are working together deliberating. Then it's a meeting.
Thank you, Gary. We appreciate your going through all of that, word by word and getting.
It's a little more
everything.
complicated than at the
Right,
surface level.
right. That's why we need you, 'cause okay, discussion motion, letter of support for House Bill 606 and Senate Bill 419, local radar and police department. Motion to support, that was Larry. Can I get a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Your Honor, so currently municipal police are restricted by law from using radar and laser technology to enforce speed limits. The state police are the only entity who are allowed to use radar in Pennsylvania. Our local police force, they're only permitted to use speed timing methods. This can be time consuming and difficult for police to set up a spot at a good location, especially where the most speed violations occur within the city. So there's two bills, House Bill 606, Senate Bill 419, and we are asking council to authorize a letter of support to send to the state representatives, saying that the council is in support of allowing our local police force to use radar.
If we send a letter of support, that is a separate action. If it's approved, if it's actually signed into law, does council still have to set the policy of whether we use it? If we're allowed to use it, do we have to set a policy of do we use it?
Yes.
Okay.
Is our chief in support?
Yes, Chief Totten is in support of using radar.
My understanding is because of, well, because the research that we did, that it's because of high urban fatalities due to crashes. Like, it's like 5,000 a year, it's 1.5 per hour. So I was thinking, it makes sense that, I support it, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Agreed?
My only concern is that once before, when we were talking with the chief about budgeting, and I was talking about revenue, and they were saying they were down on revenue because of manpower. They couldn't even do traffic stops or anything. So are we investing in money that's going to sit until we get a police force that we can afford to put police officers out there? Because again, according to Chief Totten, they don't have the manpower to do traffic enforcement.
I think that we already did that, right?
So it's still going to be a difficult to set an officer aside to do even the radar, but it's less time consuming to do radar than it is to do the timing methods,
What we're doing already.
which is what we're currently doing.
Right.
Supposed to be doing
I know on my street, there's, people go like 90, right? I had somebody hit my brother's car, full-size truck, and one of those little cars, like a little Sunfire, and just, it totaled it. I mean, so they were going, you know what I mean? So it's just one of those things that I think would work, so, I guess roll call.
McKnight,
No.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. Okay, discussion, resolution, Meadville Public Library funding for dedicated fiber connections in the amount of $1,683.50. Motion to authorize funds to Meadville Public Library.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
So this is a resolution of council of the city of Meadville authorizing funding in the amount of $1,683.50 for dedicated fiber connections at the Meadville Public Library. This stems from a request from the Meadville Public Library. The Crawford County Federated Library System has been awarded a Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund grant to install fiber connections at 7 of the 9 libraries across the county. The county has graciously said that they would help fund the installation that the grant did not cover, with the exception of the first 10 months of operation. So this is the city's portion that the library is requesting. This could come out of council's special project account.
I think the county is covering all but 10% of
Right.
that 10-month, yeah, and then it's us in Titusville, I think, is that right?
What about the other community libraries? Are there respective municipalities doing that, like Cambridge Springs?
So it's my understanding that the county has requested that the library system reach out to those municipalities. Whether or not those municipalities have agreed to cover those costs is uncertain.
Do you know?
Are you looking for a resolution? Or is it-
No, I was just gonna ask if anybody had any more questions, and then I was gonna do roll call. That's what we're supposed to be doing here. Are there any more questions? Roll call.
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. Discussion resolution, authorized signatures, property management, contract extension for DEP building, City of Meadville, and Altair Real Estate Services. Motion to authorize signatures.
Motion.
Second?
This is a resolution of the council of the city of Meadville authorizing signatures on a property management contract extension for the management of the DEP building between the city of Meadville and Altair Real Estate Services.
Does anybody have any questions? This is just an extension of the contract that we already have, right?
Correct.
Roll call.
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. Resolution authorization, or authorized signatures, Teresa L. Weigel, subdivision, 2022-1.
This is a resolution of the council of the city of Meadville for the approval of the Teresa Weigel subdivision 2022-1.
Can I have a motion to approve the subdivision?
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion?
So this is a subdivision from Terry Weigel to Rick and Alice Williams. Rick and Alice live on Vermont. Terry lives on Carmont and Woodmont. Basically, it's 846 square feet. It's this little triangle. Of course, it's tough to see up there, but it's a little triangle of land that actually what it'll do is kind of square off an open area and include the open area in Rick and Alice's yard. The rest remains with Terry. Once this is done, it would actually be consolidated by process into Rick and Alice's, so it's not creating a little tiny lot. Meets all the requirements of subdivision ordinance. It went through county and city planning, both recommend approval, so it's before council today.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Roll call.
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Roa?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye. Resolution authorize signatures, technical service agreement, City of Meadville and Zito Business.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville authorizing signatures on a technical service agreement between the City of Meadville and Zito Business.
Motion?
I'll second.
Discussion.
This is simply a renewal of the current contract that the city has. The city did reach out to two other entities to get price comparisons. Zito still came in as the least expensive. There is a correction still needed in the document that you have. Lists the address of Public Works incorrectly. It's still listed under 984 Water Street.
I
We will
think
make
Tim
that
already
change.
took care of that.
He took care of it today, yes.
I might want to add also that the speed went from 100 megabytes per second to 400 for all the various offices within. So that was a positive thing. And the price was probably half of what I could get comparable quotes for without having to buy new phones, which I don't believe we need.
Does that mean everybody can do 4 times as much work?
Yep.
That's all that was holding them back. The internet speed. But we're happy with the service. It's been,
Yeah.
We were one of the initial ones in 2012 going with Zito when they were first building their loop and expanding their footprint in Meadville, and they've been very well received over the last 10 years.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions? Roll call.
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Roa?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye. Resolution, award bid and authorize signatures, community development block grant, East Street paving project in the amount of $137,045. Lindy Paving in City of Meadville.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville awarding the bid in the amount of $137,045 to Lindy Paving for construction of straight curb, driveway aprons, and bituminous paving of East Street as part of the federal fiscal year 2019 Community Development Block Grant Contract.
Can I get a motion?
Motion?
Second.
Second.
Discussion?
So this is part of the 2019 CDBG application. It's a brick conversion that council had previously approved for East Street from Fairmont Street to the end. This was originally set to be part of the 2021 paving season, but it got pushed back because we needed to do some engineering and stormwater work on that.
Anybody have questions? Roll call.
McKnight?
Aye.
Myers?
Aye.
Roa?
Aye.
Vogel?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye. Resolution, authorized submission, Department of Conservation and Natural Resource Community Conservation Partnership Program, grant for Heidi Cooper Park.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville authorizing submission of a grant application to the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Community Conservation Partnership Program for Heidi Cooper Park project.
Can I have a motion to authorize submission?
Motion?
I'll second.
Discussion?
This is a grant application for $300,000, which is the maximum amount that DCNR will allow you to ask for this grant. And you have an updated list of the amenities included in your packet that is part of the application. This grant funding will be matched with CDBG funds.
I'd like to bring something up. I brought it up at the last meeting, but if the community is going to be spending between $750,000 and $1.3 million on Heidi Cooper Park, I really think we need to address security issues. There's been considerable vandalism over the years on multiple occasions. In fact, that's my understanding, that's why the restrooms are locked. So whether we try to get that covered as a grant or address it otherwise, I'd like to see that be a priority.
Anybody else have comments or questions? Okay, roll call.
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. Resolution to ratify submission, Commonwealth Financing Authority Local Share Account Grant for Heidi Cooper Park.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville ratifying submission of a grant application to the Pennsylvania statewide local share account grant program in the amount of $529,700 for Heidi Cooper Park.
Can I have a motion to ratify?
Motion?
Second?
Discussion?
As discussed at the March 2nd meeting, the city has submitted a local share account grant application to cover the remaining costs that DCNR and CDBG funds would not cover for the renovations to Heidi Cooper. The request includes a $9,000 administration fee. Senator Brooks has provided a letter of support for this project as well.
This is those like phase 2 and.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Roll call?
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. Resolution authorize revision to the FY 2020 Community Development Block Grant project scope for Heidi Cooper Park.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville, Crawford County, Pennsylvania, authorizing a revision of the fiscal year 2020 Community Development Block Grant project scope for improvements to Heidi Cooper Park.
Can I have a motion to authorize revisions?
Motion?
I'll second.
Discussion.
The original scope of the Heidi Cooper Park project was solely for the renovation to the basketball courts. This, by extending the scope, covers the entire project for Heidi Cooper.
And this comes from the funds that were allocated for rent.
That's the next one. This is the scope.
Okay.
It will cover those,
Okay.
essentially, to allow the renovations to the restrooms to occur.
Anybody have any questions on that? Roll call?
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. Resolution authorize revisions to FY 2020 Community Development Block Grant CB for Heidi Cooper Park.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Meadville, Crawford County, Pennsylvania, authorizing a revision of the fiscal year 2020 Community Development Block Grant CV project scope for improvements to Heidi Cooper Park.
Motion to authorize?
Motion? Second?
Discussion.
In 2020, the city was allocated $193,732 in CDBG coronavirus funds. These funds were originally given to Center Family Services and CHAPS for their rent and utility programs, but because of the emergency rental assistance program, which came down from the state and released funding at about the same time, neither entity was able to expend their funding. CHAPS actually, Center for Family Services actually gave the money back to the city, which was used for the Housing Coalition's roof replacement project. CHAPS has used a portion of it, but the funds must be expended by the end of the year, and they are not going to be able to do that. The intent is to recoup those funds from CHAPS and expend those on bathroom renovations, which is an eligible use under CDBG CV. All CDBG CV projects have to be directly tied back to COVID, so we couldn't use them for paving or something like that.
Does anybody have any questions on that?
I'll just say, I am setting up a meeting with Lynn McCumber from CHAPS just to see if I can better understand what worked with the funding that they did have and what didn't work. I can make guesses about how the funding we had to share was onerous, but doing that with the intent of understanding, the limitations of the money that we had allocated, and knowing where people are at and where the needs are, especially if we're going to do some sort of participatory approach with the rest of ARPA funds, assuming people might recognize housing as a need and knowing what worked and what didn't, and where. So I can keep folks updated on that conversation. I think it's great use.
Roll call.
McKnight,
Aye.
Myers,
Aye.
Roa,
Aye.
Vogel,
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye. So now we'll go back to, I think, Monica, you wanted to, it's time for, well, Larry, are you doing the same, like, subject?
Yeah, I was asking him if he had been done because you cut him off in the middle.
No, Larry actually just had some questions, that's what I cut off.
Yeah, I was just curious as to if this was actual garbage, because from pictures, looks like it's, part of it's maybe like landscaping or the design of terrain
Well,
itself that's holding
It's
the
actually
water.
fill dirt that was put in, but according to the ordinance, any encroachment that would cause any increase in flood height shall be prohibited, okay? So I would, and I'm not an attorney, I would say that even a raised flower bed or vegetable garden bed would fall under that. That would be illegal. And then going on back into the definition, development, any man-made change, which is filling and grading. So it doesn't matter what the material is, according to your ordinance, the way I'm reading it, it's illegal to put anything in the floodplain area. And especially something between where bodies of water cannot flow to the drain that has been there for years and provided.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but I'm just wondering, so what do you want? You just want that so the water can flow? So
Yeah,
so that's
that
just be
needs to
someone
be-
coming in, taking care of that,
It
right?
needs to be restored to the original natural grade. And I had taken my transit down there and did some measuring, and I mean, it's clear as to what the grade should be according to the street. That there should be about 12 inches of fall, I think, to that drain, roughly street level.
Right.
I didn't go into the yards, I did it on the street. But yeah, that's very easy for anybody to take a transit and determine that, yeah, if that matched the street grade, that water would go into that drain just like it was originally designed to do, so. And then I do have comments later, but, she would be next.
So I'd first like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm just following up with what my dad has already said. My husband and I, about 2 years ago, purchased 1175 South Main Street. It had been sitting empty for at least a year that we were aware of due to a leaking roof. We fixed that. We were able to return it and have it renting back out. However, now we have the situation of a lake in the backyard. Over the last 2 years, I've watched it grow bigger every year. I worked for my parents as well previously. I think I'm going on about 10 years with them. I've been watching this for some time now, and it just continues to get worse. Whenever we purchased this property, we had looked into the idea of creating parking spaces behind the duplexes for our tenants. We felt that that would be a very good convenience for them. It would obviously help with the public street situation. However, as it stands with the lake back there, we cannot. Even whenever the water does go, flow down, get saturated into the ground, the ground is still extremely saturated. Vehicles would be sinking, things along those lines. It's just not possible at this time the way things stand. Furthermore, as he's already brought up the child's bike in the yard, we now have neighborhood children coming into the backyards of these duplexes playing in this large body of water. What health and safety concerns should we be looking at here, especially whenever it comes to our insurances? I have tenants that are staying in those buildings. Do they want other families' children in their yards? Not that we have anything against children playing outside, obviously not. The issue is this going to be a safety concern that our tenants or us as landlords have to worry about? And then the last part that I would like to bring up is it's extremely disheartening that we are coming to you. We came to you guys 2 years ago and we brought this up and nothing was done, and here you are trying to create more zoning ordinances that you've already heard from 2 of the public. Here's 3, we don't think they're quite necessary to the extent that you're going for. This is a city of Meadville, not a homeowners association. What happened to creativity and everyone having their own characteristics? Just saying, and I really agree with what Jim Rowe had also said about whenever we become senior citizens or don't want to travel upstairs, we don't want to clean a big 2-story house. That would be something that would be, we really should be looking into this a little bit more with yeah, we can, but should we? Just throwing that out there. But I would really like to see something done about the lake that's in the backyard of South Main Street. Like I said, I would really like some parking spots back there, and according to your new zoning, so would you.
Yeah, thank you, number one, for you guys for coming in, but thanks for buying that building. My little sister actually grew up there, so I know
Awesome.
that, the house, yeah, that's it. So, much appreciated, I'm
So
glad to see people in it.
I do have a couple questions, just, so you guys own a property, you've had it, have you had any landscapers or anybody that is coming in to look? Because what if the settlement there, or the ground, that problem is because of the ground itself settling, because that under South Main Street, that area, there are underground streams and waters. I lived up on the other end of South Main from where you're at, and I know every year I would have to worry about my ground, my yard, being underwater for at least a couple months. So that may be that there's underground water that we have no control over. I don't know, but I'm saying that is something that, and I'm asking if that's something that you thought about or looked into.
Well, as I stated in my presentation, is whenever water sits on the ground, it saturates, it actually lifts the air up out of the ground and causes compaction.
I understand that.
And so that's what, like she said, it keeps growing. We've owned the property since 2006, and, whenever we first bought the property, it was fairly dry, but as we're getting larger amounts of water all the time, and it's compressing this. And it's clear to see that it's stopping right where the fill was. And again, if you do transit, elevations of that property, there's no reason the drain was put on a high ground, it was put on a low ground. And a transit on the property will show you, what it would be.
I understand
The body of water, I believe, is what's compressing the ground down. And I'm also concerned about the foundations of those properties with all that extra weight of the water on there. I mean, anybody that owns a swimming pool, in-ground swimming pool, knows you can't have it empty for any length of time because the outside water forces would collapse it. So, it is a big concern, and it really is 100% the fill dirt that was placed in behind that property.
Again, have you had anyone to do?
I'm very well.
I'm just telling you.
My background is probably extensive enough that I could make a pretty good judgment call on anything with construction related.
And if the water wasn't there when they purchased the property, or was slightly wet, and like we said,
And that's why I'm saying, because you're talking about erosion occurs.
No, I didn't say erosion. I'm saying it's
Please,
clear.
I listen to you, please listen to me, okay? What I'm trying to explain to you is, first of all, I lived in that neighborhood, I grew up in that part of town. I know how it floods there, I know that there is water tables underground, or streams underground in that area that causes a lot of problems. How do we know that is not part of erosion from underneath?
Because I've watched the fill dirt go in. So and that's when the problem started. I watched the fill dirt be placed in there.
Do you know who put it in?
Nope, wasn't any of my concern, because I would have thought somebody from the city should have known that you can't put fill into.
So you're saying it was someone from the city?
No.
Would have approved it.
It should have been approved, according to your ordinance. Any fill should have been approved.
Whoever the owner of that house was before Common Roots.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I don't know what.
We don't know who owned it, we just know that it happened at that time.
We just know that it putting fill dirt in violated your ordinance.
I appreciate that. I wonder, can we set up something, right? I mean, if meeting with Gary, we've got office hours, maybe we can do it.
That sounds like a good
To
idea.
keep talking.
All right, and then going back to your other, it sounds like we're using the book 1984 as our instruction manual here, building all the houses identical and everything. But I don't know, the state owns some of the highways that go through Meadville, correct? And so I guess your setback requirements, does that violate the state's setback requirements? And then the other question on that, I pony on these two here is to the elderly do not want a two-story house. They want one level. The other thing is, I don't know if anybody has ever gone up Baldwin Street in the wintertime, whenever the snow plow plows all the, there's no space between the sidewalk and the street, so they plow all the snow, and then of course, as a landowner, you have to take and move it on into the front yard. You want to reduce the amount of front yard down to 5 foot. I know for a fact, the amount of snow that got plowed along the street this past year on Baldwin would not fit into a 5 foot space, because I've moved a lot of our snow back. And if it wasn't for having all that extra space, there would have been no place for snow. So to say, hey, let's reduce this down to 5 foot for a front yard, we really need to concern, with snow also, that has to be a concern.
I think again, we're not talking about moving the houses that
Well, no,
exist.
you're not, you're
Yeah.
saying if you build a new
If you build,
house,
I
that
think it's-
we want it within 5 foot of the street, so now we have to pile snow 30 feet high in order to be able to fit that snow, or else we have to pay somebody to remove the snow. And is that really something that we want to burden homeowners with, as having to remove snow because they don't have a front yard?
Right, so
They're
I
not
think that the zoning is an ongoing process and we're discussing. So thank you so much for your questions. We're gonna do council member statements. If you have more questions for Gary, you can do that right after the meeting. Does anybody have council member statements? Jim?
Thank you. First of all, thank you to everybody who took the time to attend tonight and address council on issues that are of concern. And a heartfelt thanks to Meadville Medical Center for buying us a cruiser, which we desperately needed. It was very generous on their part. I thank them, and I thank our city manager for her efforts in negotiating that transaction. That's it, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Go ahead. Gretchen?
I guess my main thing is thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciate everyone coming and being here and the presentations. We are the community engagement people, so if you hopefully you will engage with us. We appreciate it. And thank you, Gary, for all your work on explaining the Sunshine Law and making that clear. And Jeff.
Larry?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for coming and enjoy listening to you. And I'd like to thank you for your support. It's great to see people that really care coming and voicing their concern. I'm old school also, but I do realize that in order sometimes to keep integrity, you have to make some changes. Am I going to agree with all of the changes that are going to, the zoning commission is going to come up with? No. But if it's going to better the majority or Meadville and make the majority of the people, especially downtown, I'm for it, and I think that's what we all need to focus on now. Meadville is dying. Unfortunately, people are moving out. And if the report's saying that, this is what you need to do, or this will help bring people here, then, sometimes we got to put our own good dreams and memories, put them away and move on, if we want Meadville to grow. That's how I feel. And I just hope that everybody will understand that, we're not making these decisions or these zoning things to punish anybody, but it's with our intent is to help make Meadville grow. Meadville be able to grow. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, I feel Pollyanna after Larry says that Meadville's dying, but I think exciting things are happening. I think zoning's really exciting. I really do appreciate folks coming in and voicing right where they're at with zoning, and we'll remind the public and us and myself that we've got a year to dig in and really learn and wrap our heads around this ordinance and what this can mean. And I hope, again, this is a reminder to me too, I hope that we can do that we can come open-minded and ready to learn and ask questions and really kind of try and grapple with this. What could be a big change? Is it exciting? I think Gary posed it well. Is it something that we want to do, or is it not, right? And that's, I think, fully understanding the weight of it and implications is important. Again, this is a reminder to me just as much as everyone else. Other exciting things are happening. Andy, thanks for coming. I am excited. I'm excited about the Downtown Development Corporation, and again, I'll underscore that, you know, what was conveyed to me that this is hopefully the start of a long-term investment in Meadville, right? And with Allegheny as a conduit, hopefully, right? But with Meadville as a driver, and I'm excited about that. And I'll just reiterate the session that Andy mentioned for folks to attend, second floor of the library on April 19th. It's a Tuesday evening at 6. It's open house style, so folks should come and share, right, what they want to see in our downtown, and hopefully kind of kick off what will be a very kind of engaged and participatory practice of investing in our downtown. Other things that are going on, I'm going with some members of the Climate Action Plan Task Force, and I think Rena is going on business, maybe not, to the Eco District Conference. So there's a conference in Pittsburgh about a kind of sustainable development model that's looking at kind of food-based businesses and very place-based economic development in Pittsburgh, Sharpsburg, and Etna. So that's this weekend. I'm excited about it, and I'm happy to report out if anyone's curious about it. Also going to Golden Kiwanis next Thursday to talk about Heidi Cooper. So if there's anything I should bring with me, I'll probably bring Talon and Jan if I can get them. But if there's anything else, or if you want to come, or if someone wants to come. And yeah, office hours Mondays 11 to 1, right across the hall. Thanks.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and I appreciate everybody coming in and expressing their opinions and concerns and having awesome presentations and letting us know what is going on in town. My office hours are Tuesday and Thursday. Feel free to come in, especially if you have other concerns. I'm here all day, those 2 days, and I invite anybody to come in and have a discussion. Like on the website, my job is to just move this meeting along, and I do apologize if I may be short, but that's what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Agenda items are at the beginning, non-agenda items are at the end if you'd like to discuss. Normally we don't have questions in the middle of the meeting, but you grab somebody at the end and you ask those questions, or you go to like office hours. So I do apologize if it seems short, but that's just how the meeting is supposed to be run. And all of that is on the website. But I'd like to thank Lucinda Morgan for being on the Water Authority. Although she resigned, I'm sure she did good work, and we're happy to have her help there. And thank you, Andy, again. And we're super excited to see what goes on and what we can do here in Meadville. And with that, I'm going to adjourn our meeting.
So,
To an executive
session, sorry.
to discuss potential litigation.
Right. Okay. Aye.
Wait.
Roll call, sorry.
Who, motion to adjourn?
Jim,
Yeah.
Larry.
Okay.
And now roll call, I apologize.
McKnight.
Aye.
Myers.
Aye.
Roa.
Aye.
Vogel.
Aye.
Kinder.
Aye, I get super excited with this thing here.
Would too.
I just